So the story to what's been going on in our country right now and for the last several months, as you guys may or may not know, is that President Donald Trump, throughout his campaign and still ongoing to this day, has been really debating about the potential idea of really potentially ending income taxes for the entire country, and specifically replacing income taxes with tariffs. And we have made so many videos talking about tariffs already, so I'll put some videos at the end screen if you're brand new here and haven't checked out those videos at all yet. But the idea really is that in today's video, what I really want to talk about, as the title suggests, is really exploring Trump's tariffs and also about Trump's income tax situation, about his plans to potentially end income tax, the story behind it, his motivation, and also maybe just ending this real talking about whether or not it's possible, and whether or not this is a good idea or not so good idea. So part of this video will be a little bit opinionated because it's going to talk about whether it's a good idea or not. But the other part of it is that we're going to talk about some objective facts about what can potentially come about if he really does truly end income taxes. Of course, before we begin, I'd love to hear your personal thoughts in the comments down below. Maybe feel free to comment your thoughts about ending income tax. Do you think it's going to be a good idea? Do you think it's a bad idea? Or do you think maybe it just doesn't matter because maybe he just doesn't have the power to do it to begin with? Would love to hear your thoughts. So with that being said, like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, and let's get started. So maybe to start by talking a little bit about the history and the background story to where income taxes really comes from. And this is really important because you're going to see how this is going to relate to present day. But the history of income taxes is that back in 1913, what really ended up happening is that back in 1913, there was actually no federal income tax, believe it or not. We still had to pay taxes, and I think that's a very common misconception throughout basically most of American history, at least certainly modern day American history. There was always going to be some kind of tax, but simply put is that before 1913, all of the taxes were basically other kinds of taxes, such as like sales tax, property tax, but from specifically income, that was something that really came about when they passed the 16th Amendment on February 25th of 1913. So for over 100 years now, certainly from the release of this video, it became a reality for Congress to have the power to impose income taxes. Long story short is that Trump wants to bring us back to that golden age, according to him. Again, I'm not saying it's the golden age, but according to him, he wants to bring us back to that historical time period when income taxes wasn't a thing, hence his slogan for his campaign, which is really talking about how he wants to make America great again. But what does it mean to be great again? That's, of course, subjective, which is why you guys can feel free to drop it down in the comments what you guys think about this. But the idea is that Donald Trump wants to bring us back to those days when there was no income tax, and specifically by replacing that amount of money with tariffs. And that's the golden thing that we've been talking about throughout the last couple of weeks now. Now, what are the other people in our just country saying about this currently right now? The opinions right now, especially among a lot of economists, is a little bit all over the place, but I would say the majority of the economists that are inside of our country really feel that doing such a thing where we eliminate income taxes is something that actually would not be a very good idea. However, again, there are a lot of mixed opinions. Some people really support it. I know obviously deep down inside a lot of us do not want to pay income taxes because obviously this means more money in our pockets, but there is a lot of necessity to being able to collect income tax. This is the part that's a little bit opinionated, but the part that is very objective and is not opinionated at all is going to be about why it's whether or not it's possible to do this, ending income tax situation, and it's going to all come down to the math that's involved. Because, and this one's very important, because the story behind it is that a lot of economists feel right now that while it might or might not be a necessarily good idea to end income taxes, the math, at the end of the day, our country and our government needs money to run. And the math, just simply put, just does not add up if we were to get rid of the income tax situation. So for example, over the years, just for some statistics to really get a better picture about it, only 2% of the total federal revenue came from tariffs. This number will probably increase now that Donald Trump is increasing tariffs and trying to, impose tariffs on so many different foreign countries. But can it really, increase enough to the extent that it's going to generate enough money to, to replace income taxes? That's the part that's really, really debatable. They collected, for a little bit of some, scale and perspective, they collected about $77 billion in tariffs last year, but about $2.2 trillion from individual income taxes, from the taxpayers, the people like you and I, when we pay taxes. So the conclusion to this is that in order to replace income taxes with tariffs, you'd have to essentially skyrocket those tariffs significantly to cover those costs. And I've mentioned it before in a lot of past videos, even before we were talking about Trump and his campaign and presidency, about why in anything in the world of business, it is very, very important to do the math behind it, because when it comes to life in general, but especially business, economics, and everything in that world, there are a lot of situations that you may end up running into that where the theory behind a certain something might make sense. So for example, in this case, again, we don't want to pay, income taxes. Most of us, I think it's very fair to say we'd rather pay less taxes. But while it is true that the theory might make sense in theory, the actual math in practical practice may not necessarily add up. And I think this is the part that's very, very important. So for example, how this applies in business, and I'm just using this as an example to kind of illustrate, is that you can sometimes run a business where maybe you collect $100,000 worth of income, right? But after all of the cost, fees, expenses, and everything, your take home can end up being only about $15,000 to $20,000. And $100,000 is very, very different than $15,000/$20,000. And this discrepancy is actually a very, very accurate representation in business of what a lot of business models have to go through. There are a lot of companies that you might see that talk about how they generate millions and millions of dollars, but when you actually do the math and calculate their expenses, they're actually potentially sometimes even losing money sometimes, So in business, what's actually dangerous is that it's not like a regular job. In a regular job, you always are going to make money. You might not make a lot of money, but you will still make money. But in business, there are a lot of business models that, if not done right, you actually can end up losing money. So how this applies to our current day and about what's been going on right now in our economy is that, because while it is true that maybe getting rid of income taxes might sound like such a golden thing, the reality is at the end of the day, our government is going to need money to run itself. And so if you get rid of income tax, the amount of money that you would have to generate from tariffs in order to match the amount of money that you currently generate from income tax is just so great that, simply put, is that it just is it's not likely. That's really the bottom line behind it. And I think that's something that really, really is important, that has to be talked about if you're really going to replace income taxes with tariffs. And I think another really, really important argument to make, and this is another argument I think that a lot of people are making right now against doing the, tariffs replacing income tax situation, is really about the fact that the level and the amount of money or the amount that you would have to increase your tariffs by in order to replace income taxes is just so great that it would have to make things incredibly, incredibly expensive in order to do such a thing. If we were to implement tariffs, and as we know from past videos, which again I'll put at the end screen because at videos in the past where I go into really deep details about this, but what we've talked about is that tariffs are very, very inflationary. When you implement tariffs, what ends up happening is that things start to cost more money, expenses start to go up, especially expenses from things in foreign countries. And so if you decide to implement tariffs and replace it with taxes, the amount of money that you would, or the amount of the percentage and the rates of the tariffs that you would have to increase tariffs by in order to replace income tax would be so great that it would incentivize a lot of companies to no longer want to do business with foreign countries, which might sound like a great idea for some people because, again, going back, at the end of the day, even Donald Trump, supports the idea of how he wants to make the United States a lot more self-reliant. He doesn't want to have to rely on foreign countries. But at the very end of the day, if we end up doing such a thing, the problem is that it's going to cause a lot of businesses to now no longer want to do business in foreign countries, but instead focus their attention on doing business within their own country, which is in this case inside of America itself. If we end up doing this, it can potentially skyrocket inflation even greater than it already is right now to all new highs and levels that we have never even seen before in just American history. So that's really the important thing behind it, is that the bottom line behind what I'm really trying to say is that it's just a very, very difficult thing to execute. The math may not necessarily add up when you really think about it, as we've mentioned, and that the scale to how much you would have to increase tariffs by, it just would be a very, very massive struggle to be able to increase those tariffs and try to incentivize companies to, you know, do business or to continue doing business without having to basically start to, you know, change up the way that they do business and make things difficult, and I think to continue running an operation. And I think that's the biggest idea really behind this. But of course, beyond this is, I'd love to hear your personal thoughts, because again, part of this video was a little bit opinionated, but part of this was very factual. You know, we did the math, we talked about the percentages and everything like that. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about whether you think this is a good idea. Do you think Donald Trump can even do this? Because again, a lot of this stuff is going to very likely require congressional approval, and we don't know if Donald Trump has the power to even physically implement these policies. But that's up to something that we just have to see in the future about how things actually ultimately end up playing out. So with that being said, if you guys enjoyed this video, hopefully you guys did, like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell as we make more videos, and hope to see you guys next time. Thank you guys so much again.